thing.
Right. It once again is up here on Nerve Check, and unfortunately, we have somehow made Oscar the Grouch come on with us here. We have Mr. Mike Rossi. He's here to talk about our book. So now we have two beautiful people. We have the brains, and you still have me. So how you doing, Mike? How you doing, Ray? John? Still love the mustache, buddy.
Hello, friends. So you mentioned the brains and you. So Ray is the brains?
Ray is the brains.
Oh, no, I thought
it's not me.
John's kind of that evil genius that we all kind of crutch on at some point, which is why he ended up with the mustache.
I like it.
Here's a story. When I first met John, he had a mustache a beard that could be getting close to Gandalf style. Like it was out there. It really was.
Right.
Then he got a real job, and I don't know what the hell happened. So
pretty much true. Yeah.
Looking good. So how does this normally work? I spoke with Ray before on his you guys were Nerve Check, right? So and so now you guys are actually like, you formed yourself a little super group here, right? Pretty nice. It was the heat of the moment. So you're all here now. Hi. This is my first time on. How do you guys normally do? You normally have like, I don't know, show notes? Do you do any prep?
Well, sometimes I do. Sometimes, as the brain, I do show notes. For this one,
this is why we have Ray. He does all the all the cool stuff, like the pictures and the things and the writings and the. Yeah, that's why whenever you just see me on there, it's absolute crap. It's just me talking to people.
But for this time, the show notes was listening to the Karen Charge episode, or understanding what you talked about on that. So I guess my first question, since I get to ask the first question, is Mike, you're an engineer.
I'm an engineer. That's correct.
How does an engineer end up writing a book?
That's an excellent question. All right, so I don't know if we set this up correctly, but I am the author of the upcoming book, Honors Price. Available for pre-order now on Amazon.com or Zemo. The ebook is coming out the 15th of July, so throw me $11 and go grab that shit and put it on your Kindle. All right, so the question is, how did an engineer who mostly thinks in binary and knows a lot of math, right? So I am a product of Catholic education, right? And so I spent 12 years doing Catholic school before I went to college. And Catholic school has a large emphasis on reading and writing. I had taken all of the AP courses for math and science, all 2 of them when I was in high school, right? But they had history, they had English, right? So when I was younger, I was actually saying to my father, I said, "Okay, Dad, I'm getting ready to go to college. I think I want to be an engineer, but I also might want to be like a history teacher. I love history. I was reading history at the time, lots of it, right?" And I remember my dad sat me down. He said, "Okay, now you've been talking about this for a couple months. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but history and English will make you interesting. Math and science will make you money. So go and make money, and in your free time, do the things that interest you." And I was like, that sounds like a smart thing to do, right? So essentially, after that, I went in engineering, but I did have a good English background, and I've also done a lot of it's going to sound stupid, right? But you don't spend 20 years playing Dungeons and Dragons and not learn something, guys. But like, there's a certain amount. Like, I love fantasy reading. I've done a lot of reading in that genre. I've done a lot of reading in other genres too. So I had an understanding of like what I liked in a good story structure, etc. And I was writing short stories actually for myself and for the D&D campaigns we would do. So I've been gaming with the same guys now for, Jesus Christ, coming up on 30 years.
Oh my God.
Right. And so we all get together every Sunday, if not Sunday, we might have to skip a couple, but a good 40 weeks of the year, we're getting together and we're playing either D&D or some other role-playing game. And a lot of times what would happen is I would be the chronicler for the group, right? And so last time this happened, and sometimes you put in some flourishes and some flair in that description, and really kind of key in on the idiosyncrasies and really try to punch up some of the jokes, etc., that happen around the table. And then I was also doing some beat writing for Dash 28. I say beat writing; it's all like, God, we're making content yet. But part of that, besides I do a bunch of articles on sportsmanship and play styles, but the other thing that I did was I did a serialized short story called The Bannermen, which I never finished because I got the opportunity to, through the Dash 28 stuff, I got the opportunity to review Ben Stoddard's first book. Right, he sent me an advanced copy of Drowned Secrets and said, "Hey, could you read this and write me a review?" So I read it. I wrote a review. I put it up on Dash 28. I did it for a couple other things that were coming out from Wayne Desar, and there was a call for Ben reached out to me afterwards and he said, "Hey, just so you know, Brandon Russbond's looking for authors. You may want to send him some of your writing." I said, "Okay, sure." So I sent him to him, and he looked at it and he was like, "This is pretty good. I think that we could do something." He goes, "Send me a pitch." Sure. So I sent him a pitch. There was essentially the Bannerman with some other stuff, and he responded. He goes, "I'm not gonna. No, don't. We're not doing. No, not that. That pitch. Dude, give me another pitch, right?" So he said, "Write what you know," and I was like, "Well, I've been playing dwarves for 20 years, so I'll write a dwarf novel," and it went from there. Right? So in the scheme of things, I'm an engineer, but now I'm more like engineering school. You go to engineering school to learn to think like an engineer. Right. And so
not at all.
It did. Well, systemic, take it all down, put it back together again. Right. Do from the inside out. When I actually sat down to write the book, I did it very methodically. I'd actually read a couple books about how to write books. Go figure. Because I was interested in the idea of it. And so it was, one of them is called Writer's Boot Camp. And it is step by step, very systematic. Get your characters, get your character sketches, figure out what the overall plot is, right? It's cool. It's like a little green hardback book. It's got like Army insignia all over it, right?
Okay, my daughter has this book.
Yeah,
she's actually just finished university for editing, and she read that, and I know it's in her bedroom. But I'm not going to go in there to try and find it. But I guarantee you, and I'm not kidding. Right. It's like, wait a second. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm not kidding. My daughter has that book.
Right. So that one is great. And there's another one by Orson Scott Card that talks about how to write good fantasy and sci-fi. And so those are the two that I leaned on heavily. And also, you read Stephen King's On Writing, which is just interesting. I'm not actually a very big Stephen King fan. I don't find that his writing really speaks to me very much. I think, but a lot of it's because I grew up with his movies, and his movies are really culty and kind of shitty. My personal opinion. Right, I'm waiting for people to argue with me.
No, we're not going to argue.
But so to sum up, because
that was a long answer.
Education, you got the background. You've been doing this for 30 years as the chronicler for your D&D group. You wrote short stories for Dash 28, and you've then utilized your engineering mind to distill the requirement to write a novel into the scientific method, laying everything out chapter by chapter. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, that's exactly what I did. And then I went to write the thing, and then I had to, then I realized how hard it is. I mean, you can script everything out. You can say, like, literally, I had 12 pages of chapter 1. Here's what's going to happen to get the story. Here's the plot points that have to happen. Here's the stuff that moves ahead. This is the point of view character. This is the things that happen, and then chapter 2, chapter 3, all the way through until I got to the end. So I knew where the story was going to go. I knew that there was going to be a beginning, a middle, and end. I had, an idea about all that stuff. So all that was plotted out. And then I sat down to start writing prose. And the first chapter, boom, banged it out. There you go, no problem. Second chapter, bam. Third chapter, I wrote it. I read it. I was like, this is trash. Trash. Went back, wrote it again. Still kind of trashy. I was like, okay, we're going to move on to the fourth chapter. Fourth chapter came out good. Went back to the third chapter again. Changed the point of view character. Wrote it again. Made sense. Right? And so that you have an idea of what you want to do, and you have an idea of how it's going to go. But then when you start writing, like in the beginning, I was like, okay, here's the new character that I'm introducing. I need to figure out his voice. I need to figure out her voice, right? Her point of view. And not just the point of view of what the eyeballs see, but also like the point of view of what they want to happen and how it their background and how it reflects the things that they're seeing, right? So you feel like you're kind of walking in the character's head. And the first couple chapters were very tough. Some of them were easy. Like the two protagonists, the three main protagonists are siblings from the Demuse clan that are leading their people back out of the Imperial Dwarf Empire into back to the Halpi Peninsula to retake their ancestral home. The siblings, I had no problem thinking through their points of view and who they were. And then I was like, man, I got this other ranger guy. He's cool. I got this ranger guy. So I wrote him, and I wrote that section. And I realized at the end it was this cool action sequence, super awesome, but I didn't have anything about him in it. It could have been any Jamoke, right? Just running down, punching orcs in the face. I was like, okay, I gotta rework this a little bit so that it has more of this honest to God point of view, right? Of him and what he's into, and so when you run into him again, you kind of know what you're going to get in that chapter, right? Like you guys have read fantasy books where it's every once in a while, like the I think Robert Jordan does this and did this, and others, and I think the idea is that you open the chapter and you start reading and you're like, oh sweet, Robert Jordan, this is going to be a Matt chapter. I can't wait to read this chapter.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
yeah, and you open up, you're like, it's an Egwene chapter.
It's gonna be a slog.
It's gonna be a little bit.
Yeah,
it's gonna be a little bit. I'm gonna twiddle my shawl. I think about the intrigue. I'm like, would you just do something, right? You know what I mean? And so, I had to reflect that, but also make it so, hopefully people don't go, this guy. You know, skip 15 pages, move on to the next, right? You know what I mean? So anyway, but that was the hard part of it. So I had it all sketched out. I had the skeleton, but putting the flesh and the bones on it, you can still make an ugly creature, right? You can still have Frankenstein's monster by the time you're done, right? But
very true.
Anyway,
so that's not what this is, obviously.
And before we go on to the next question, I just want to reiterate this is Honor's Price coming out in Canada on the 13th of August. So because we're a bit slower in Canada. It's available on Amazon, and I have heard from Mike that if you buy it and he sees you in a tournament, he will happily autograph it for you.
Oh yeah.
If you bring your copy. So.
The whole idea of signing something for somebody is bananagrams to me, and I will feel very self-conscious and awkward if you ask me to do so. Which, now that I said that, was not what I should have said. Mistakes were made in real time. I really wish you guys did more editing.
Well, we don't. My follow-up question is, what if they just skip all the preamble and just ask you to sign them?
Ew.
Still a yes or no?
That's weird. Come on, right?
All right, just checking.
I mean, it's a little weird. Listen, John, I'll give you long, awkward hugs, but I'm not signing your junk.
What if it's not my junk?
Well, come on, John, it's you.
Sorry, I thought we were bargaining.
The good news is you only hit the in the eye, and that's about it. But
right. Hard right. Okay.
Yep. So I have a follow-up question, actually. Not related to
oh, good. I'll field this.
You had your process laid out where you mapped it all out, but what was the actual mechanical process of writing the prose? Like the romantic idea of authors sitting, smoking their cigarettes and drinking their whiskey and banging away on a typewriter. Is that accurate? Did you block time? Did you wait till everybody was asleep? How did you actually get the monumental task of 100,000 words, give or take, done? How did you get it done?
Yeah, excellent question. So I was, this is going to sound odd when I say it, but I was lucky because I signed the contract, and a couple months later, the world went into lockdown for COVID.
Right. Yeah.
And so I was one of the ones that was still going into work. So I still, I hop in the car, go to work. I'm in this giant building that holds 1,200, 1,500 people, and there's only 5 of us in the building. But I'm there to make sure the computers are on and, whatever. And so, I'd go in, I would do work, I would come home. I at the time, I had my daughter every weekend, but I didn't have her during the week. And so I was living with Corey at my house. And I would come home, I would make dinner, I would go upstairs to the spare guest bedroom, and I would crack open the computer, and then I would sit down for 2 to 3 hours, and I would have a glass of bourbon next to me. I would play the same music over and over again, and I would begin writing. So, and I would make sure that I had that time 3 to 4 days a week where I would just sit down and I would write. And then sometimes you do the work and you get done, you're like, banged out 1,500 words, boom. And there are times you're like, well, I got 7 sentences. It's all garbage. We got to delete it all and start again. I cannot get the words to come out right. It doesn't sound right. Literally. There are times when I would write sections, and if it wasn't flowing, I was at the top. I was like, you got to rework this. And in bold, and I would just throw out as many words and ideas as I could, and I would go back and like Legos and kind of put it back together again. You know what I mean? But you have to have dedicated time. Like, I don't know how Ben Stoddard does it, right? Ben Stoddard writes, I think he's on his 3rd book now. He puts in mad words. He's got a family and kids and a job and a right. And seriously, and they're young kids, from what I understand. Like, I don't, right? Ray, can you imagine being like, hey, wife of mine, I need 3 hours a week, 4 days a week for the next year. But I swear to God, it's going to be worth it. It's a magnum opus. It's going to be amazing, right? It's like, shit, it will. Pulse. You get yourself to hanging out with the kids and stop the BS, right? So, in a lot of ways,
I don't want to screw up.
No, absolutely not, right? In a lot of ways, COVID was a blessing as far as that went, because it gave me the time to actually buckle down and do it. So, like, if I've been thinking about, depending on the reception of how this book goes, if I sit down to write another one, am I in a spot in my life where I could sit down and do that again? Now, I wrote the entire thing in 14 months. In, out, done. Yeah, I mean, well, but it dedicated time, right?
Yeah.
Right. And that's doing it and then revising it. And my wife is amazing. One, she reads more fantasy and stuff than I do. She is smarter than I am, and she has no problem sitting down and reading it and going, this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good, rework this, edit this, too many words, right? She was my first editor, and Brandon Rossbaum might not want to hear this, but she was my best editor because she saw the raw stuff before it went to him. You know what I mean? And she was amazing through all of it. So that was one of the other nice things too, is that we were together, but not married at the time. And she was like, yeah, if you're doing it, then I'm here to help. And I was like, sweet, does this suck? And she's like, no, it's actually quite good. Okay, good. So I'm going to keep going down. Right. So it's a big deal, you know? So I don't know. I don't know if I could do it again, but I would want to. I would want to sit down and try it again, but it would be much longer to get it done. Right. But I would imagine the process would be the same. Right.
Do you think it would be longer, or do you think you've learned some lessons that you could apply from the first experience going through the editing process that you could bring to the next?
That's an excellent question, Ray. And so I think that the actual act of writing the draft and then writing the second draft, which really is the thing you send to you don't send your first draft to the editor. The first draft, Neil Gaiman described it in a couple interviews where he says your first draft, you write down everything that happens. And then the second draft, you rewrite the whole thing and you make it sound as if you meant it to sound like that. Because the first time it's not going to be right. It's not going to feel right. It's not going to sound right. You know what I mean? It's going to be too many words, not enough description here, not enough description there, plenty of description here, kind of over-describe that. And you have to balance it out, right? I think that the actual writing would be the same. What I would know, however, is I went through 4 rounds of revisions with Brandon Rossbaum when he got it. And now that I know what he's looking for, and I understand that what a professional editor is looking for, I'll probably make it so the editing process will be much shorter, right? Yeah. 1, because I can speak to him, and 2, I can there was legitimate stuff that he was telling me, like, man, fix this, fix that. Don't do that technique. That technique is a bad technique. Fix that, right? And so that would actually make the editing a lot faster, I think. But the actual act of writing, I don't know if I could speed it up, to be honest, right?
It's still a lot of volume of words. Like, still takes time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, Honest Price is 137,000 words, something like that. Yeah. Wow. You know, in Word, it's 275 pages. I have no idea what that means for a book, like a real book that's bound and on my shelf.
Yeah.
You know? But
you're probably hitting around a 300-page book, I would think.
That's cool.
Like a novel, like a Dragonlance novel.
Yeah.
Right? Like that size. Yeah.
Right.
It's almost like a real book.
Right. Seriously. But it's the kind of book that I actually went out to write. I wanted something that was, I don't want to say it's, light, but it's lighter. It doesn't have a ton of gravitas. The good guys do stuff. The bad guys do stuff. The good guys win. It's pretty good. You see some character growth in there, and there's some good writing. There's some good stuff that happens, right? But it is it's a Marvel movie.
It's a self-contained episode. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You know, it was pretty fun. Hopefully you feel better after reading, you know?
I always wondered how you would come up with like the names of things, because you've made up your own clan, you've made up your own characters, you've made up your own people. Like how do you get through all that? I mean, look, I know you wear a kilt to tournaments and that sort of thing, and that's absolutely fantastic. Like trust me, it's absolutely fantastic. I couldn't do that. One, I'm English. I wouldn't. But two, it's not going to happen, unfortunately. Right. But two, just coming up with like just the name of the clan and how you just start from that one little spot is just it's fascinating actually to me.
Sure.
Like, how did you come up with that?
Okay, so so a couple things. The good guys are all okay. So you know how like in Army Builder you can custom name the characters and you can custom name the units. So I've been doing that for the last couple years now. Before I started writing the novel, and I knew that my clan name was the clan Damuz, Dedaamuz, right? And so that's based on Dinadek Damuz is two characters that I played in my D&D game. Years, you play 30 years, you have all these character names. So I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, well, obviously his brother's name is Darun, and obviously their sister's name is Diessa, because it's all D's, and this is what we do. They're like a 1990s family. It's like Jake and John and Jake. It's like Jesus Christ, right? So, which also begins with the J. So I had the names for all those people like kind of all set, right? But then, my computer is about to die. I'm going to get a plug. Give me a plug. You may want to. Nice. So,
double D's,
triple D's, triple D's,
Hey.
So, on Dwarves. So anyway, I knew the character names for. I also knew that the characters were based on and free dwarves are based on Welsh. So I would put in some names into the Welsh English translator and be like, okay. What is the name for if I want to put a name for a earth elemental? Well, let's take a look. And I was throwing all kinds of like earth words and see what came up in Welsh. And I would take that and kind of fuse it a little bit and go, here's a word, here's a name. And then for the bad guys, I don't know. I was like, bad guys, Abyssal Dwarf should have Z's in their name.
Yep.
Z's evil name, right?
Yeah.
Letter, it shows up, right? So what you do is you go into random name generators, you go back through your D&D games, you go there to anything, and you try to find names that sound like the character is going to be, right? And then you use them. Now, that being said, it's very hard to sit down and go, okay, here's a bunch of names, and not have them be in anything else. So once I came up with a name, I was like, okay, we're going to Google that to see if it's a character name in another novel or something like that. Right? Because I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. I checked for most of them. A couple of them, like one of the characters' names is Reese. That is actually a Welsh name, right? So I was like, well, that's a guy's name, so I'm going to use that because anyway, so I mean that's where the names came from. And then when you are working in someone else's world, I'm writing in Panathor, right? So like all the unit names are set, all of the place names are set, right? Yeah. A lot of that stuff, it's fine. It's not a big deal. You know what I mean? Those that actually makes it easy. If I had to sit down and build a world from whole cloth and not have it sound like, just derpy land and whatever, like I would have such a hard time coming up with a bunch of names that didn't sound like I was just, Googling, give me stuff in Albanian. You know what I mean? But, it is what it is. So I don't know if that answered your question, right? Because that actually is, it's I've always had a story with the army, right? And once again, it's that, it's my army. And on the display board, it has to have a name. Well, who are these guys? Well, this is the Clan Damuz from the Red Mountain. I just said that because it sounded cool. Then I was like, oh man, they come from a place called the Red Mountain. So why is it called the Red Mountain? Oh, right. You would think it's because of the ground. False. It's because the trees that are there when the fall all turn red. Right. Yeah. You know what I mean? So anyway, neither here nor there. So
I mean, but you're in a unique position. Like you are actually, you're writing the lore for a game that is going to go on, we hope, for decades. Like, I mean, and you're on the ground level, and you're like, this is where it's starting, and this is how it happens, and these are the things that. And people are going to take this, and then years later, you're going to be like the old Warhammer guys who started up all that stuff, and later on, it's going to be like, this is all going to be stuff that you started.
I think so. One of the cool things that I was able to do, and I talk about this in the other podcasts that I've been on and stuff, but I think it's important to reiterate, is I was able to work with Ben collaboratively while we were figuring out what dwarves and Panathor are, because he, I got the book deal, and then a couple months later I was told, hey, he's writing a trilogy, and I'm like, oh shit. So I reached out to him and was like, Ben, we got to talk. He said, yeah, we totally have to talk. So we, at first it was like, let's not step on each other's toes with our writing. I was like, no, we got to go deeper. We have to we have to figure out what the society is like. I don't want to sit back and wait for Mantic to tell us. We're gonna pitch a bunch of ideas to them and see what they say, right?
So I heard your discussion on that fact, reaching out to Ben, having the collaborative process. Are you going to release a set of appendices with all your notes as to like, here's what the free dwarfs are, here's their culture? Because you talked about like a 5-page or 12-page back and forth with
after all was said and done. Yeah, there's around 7-8 pages, right? Of this is their well. The cool thing, I don't know as if I have to, and the reason why, is one, the book is being printed, so I can't add anything to it now. But more importantly,
I'm just thinking in the future, if you would ever add or be like, hey, look,
Well, I mean, but in the thing that I actually really am thankful for is the fact that Ben was able to take that first novel, Pride of a King, and really pour a lot of our ideas into that, because my book was very small and self-contained, right? I'm creating, no one knows anything about me. Mantic was like, sweet, we'll give you this little corner. You start here and go to there and don't go anywhere else. All right, no problem, Matt Gilbert. Anything you need me to do, right? And he's like, don't use any named characters. Don't change anything in the world, and stop by this date because we have other cool stuff happening after that date. I was like, no problem. So my sandbox was very small. Matt's was very big. I'm sorry, Ben's was very big, and because Ben's was big, he was able to put a lot of our ideas into motion, right? Whereas I was writing a lot of stuff where it was from one clan's perspective in one society. I don't really get into imperial culture very much, right? I do a lot of, you see a window into Abyssal Dwarf culture only through the two characters that are actually like named Abyssal Dwarf characters in the book, right? But you do get a window into that, which I think is kind of cool. But I mean, to your point, yeah, I am nominally one of, when this book comes out, I'll be one of 7 or 8 Kings of War novels that are currently out. I'm one of them. Yeah, buddy. Right. And so, I already have an idea for a second one, and not with these characters, with Mouse. And I think there's other stuff to explore.
And I think I want to see your take on Ratkin, because you had free dwarfs versus rats, which would be an interesting take.
Yeah, and well, I mean, there's a lot of the free dwarfs fight in my book. They fight a lot of there's slave orcs and slave rats, and right, and so but they're like, there's no name characters with them, so you don't really get a face. But I really want to dive into that, but I don't know if I'm going to get the opportunity to. Right, I have other ideas now that I think that have been percolating that I really think are going to be cool. Right?
Do you want to share one of your cool ideas?
Well, I mean, it's I mean, we're right now. It's the working premise is it's an ogre mercenary and his red goblin sidekick, right?
Traveling
stuff, right? And so it's funny. Each time I mention that, the first thing every time I've done, it's like, oh, like Gotrek and Felix. I'm like, no. So far as they're two bros walking around doing stuff, but it's not one guy with a death wish and one guy who actually is, urbane and thinking, right? It's a little different than that, but I know who the big bad's going to be. I have a really good idea about how I want to present it. I think I have a writing style for this that's actually going to be really complimentary. I mean, I'm talking it up in a lot of ways. I'm doing it so I can psych myself up for sitting down and beginning the process again, right? Trust me, it's going to be great, right? But the other side of it is if this novel sells in the tens and people read it and go, you know what, Mike, it really was not good, and maybe you're not as, maybe you should hold off and just be doing math. And I'm like, okay, well, right, if that's the case, and I'll end up writing some stuff for myself instead of trying to publish it. I think this is going to be a pretty good. I think I like the story, and other people that have read it that I trust also read it and said it was very good. So not a waste of their time.
Speaking of reading it,
Oh yeah.
Speaking of reading it, can we get a teaser? Couple minutes, maybe like a paragraph.
See, now you asked that when let me see if I.
We may or may not have asked this before as well.
Yeah, but when you send me stuff like that, it sounds like a joke.
No, I'm serious. I want to hear it.
A joke?
I mean, I also want a teaser, but of the book this time.
Yeah.
I have made one engineer reference the entire time. I have not said anything. I've been good.
You have. I mean, you could make more. One of the
saying,
characters is an engineer, so that's.
I sent it to all the people who I trust. I was like, that means no engineers.
That means
brutal and also true.
Because if you look at my background, there are no fantasy books. Like, it's all military history, which Mike was talking about, saying how he made battles with thousands or hundreds of thousands, which I appreciated, because when I read some of the earlier books where like, and 20 people move here, I'm like, no. So I appreciate your desire to add scale and use your military history knowledge on this book, Mike. I'm looking forward to reading that part.
I hope that it feels authentic, to be honest. Right? Authentic, like I know it. Like I was there, man. I was there. Right? Let's see. I don't know. Let's try this. This is the first chapter. Well, I'll just do the first chapter.
Just the opening paragraph.
Yeah, why not? Right. Reese's footsteps echoed on the weathered stone tiles as he walked through the halls of Lingir Kadu, the seat of Clan Damuz. He ruefully reflected that all he did these days was bring Lord Drozone bad news. Today was no different. His rangers had spotted the enemy's advanced scouts only a day's march away. The Abyssal Dwarf army would arrive in 2-3 days at most. This is where the real smelting starts, he thought. We're out of time.
That's
Good
fantastic.
start.
Yeah. It's definitely, it's going to be more iconic than, having the best or worst of times show up in something.
Well, right. Every time someone says that, I keep thinking of the Simpsons episode where Mr. Burns has 1,000 monkeys typing, and because he wants them all to type like the best new novel, and one of them he picks one up. He's like, "It was the best of times. It was the worst of Tim's. Murder this monkey," and he moves on to the next thing. It's amazing.
Well, I don't think we can top that as an ending to this episode. So, Mike, thank you very much for being on Nerve Check.
Yeah.
Best episode listened to by tens of people.
Yes.
Ones.
This is good. I mean,
The best of the tens.
well, yeah, obviously the most refined gentleman. Right?
Exactly.
God, I hope not.
Honors Price coming out August. Final questions.
Thank you, man. It's great to actually, one, for you to come on here and waste your time with us, and, and two, honestly, like that, I rarely get a chance to actually read a book, but that was something that I'm definitely going to get into. Like that's a hell of a hook on the way through the door.
Nice, dude. Awesome. I love to hear it.
That was a very strong opening, yeah. And the only other question I had written down was, is there a romance in this book?
Ooh.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yes, but in dwarven fashion, it is understated.
Do they both have beards?
No, dwarf women do not have beards in Panathor, as far as I know.
Fair enough.
You had your chance. You had your chance to make that a thing.
I did. I opted
I'm
not.
happy you chose not to be honest.
I'm not saying this is a bad idea.
So, right. Kind of icky. Beard nuzzles. I described a lot of beard nuzzles.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I got.
Well, yeah.
How about you, Ray?
Ray's over it. He's done.
Thanks again,
Ray,
Mike.
So actually, I have a question for you, Ray. So,
Sure.
do you read any fantasy books at all?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And listening to you talk about how The Hobbit was your first foray into fantasy.
Oh, you're going to get into a long conversation at this point in time.
Well, I mean,
Scramble done.
There are so many things we can go down that path with. Yeah, that was great to hear for me too.
okay, so let me.
My view is a great book is a book you can come back to different times throughout your life and get different things from it.
Yes.
And it works for Lord of the Rings. I read Lord of the Rings as a teenager. adventure story, great, fantasy, etc. Read it when I was in the military. Read it after I'd gone on deployment and came back.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood and I empathized with Frodo much more.
Yes.
And especially in Return of the King, where everyone talks about like the 3 different layers and the 3 different endings and how it just drags on for 200 pages. But it was Tolkien saying, I've done it. I've gone through the trenches. War sucks. And you still carry some of it home. And going away and coming home, I was like, I get this. I didn't get that as a teenager. Like as a teenager, you're like, what the hell? This is 100 pages of like fluff. Like just be done.
Right.
So I've read that. I've been stuck on the Wheel of Time.
We all have.
I'm in book 7 right now, and apparently that's the grind stage of just shoot me now.
You just got to get through it.
Give it up.
I have read most of the Panathor books, with the exception of the Celestials. I'm kind of stuck on that one. My favorite today, actually, I really enjoyed Broken Alliance, because
that's my favorite too.
Some of it reminded me of going through military college, where you have your halfling going through military college with the humans, and all the different companies competing with each other. Because I live that. I live that for 4 years. So yes, I do read some fantasy.
Sure. So when you do read those fantasy books, what are your thoughts about being military historian, military, knowledgeable, like legitimately knowledgeable about military matters, as opposed to me, who just does a bunch of reading about it, right? Does the writing of the fight scenes and the battles, and there's 2 different things. The fight scenes are one thing. I write a good fight scene because I fight
You've done it
multiple times a week, right? But do you, when you're looking at a battle scene, do they usually come across as really like engaging and cool and right?
I think you hit the nose. You hit this question well, which is there's only so much you can see.
Right.
And there's only so much you can influence. And I know you talked about that in the medieval context. But it's true to this day.
Yeah.
Where what people don't realize is even something as simple as take that hill. Something 400 meters away with all the modern radios in the world. Like that takes about 40 minutes of prep time.
Right.
About 10 minutes of action. And once you commit, you can't adjust.
Right.
So everything is much slower than what you think. They kind of showed that in Broken Alliance, where they had the battles and they had the elements being used from the flanks to attack the enemies with the Rhodia.
Yeah.
And I thought that one was well done. Because I like that element of fog. It also kind of lets the author not have to go into all the details. Like I'm sure your fight scenes will be far better than what I can envision, because I think you've been punched in the face more times than I have. So you got that aspect of it.
Right.
But I think you understand from the military history that things move slower, things have mass, and they have weight, and they take time.
Right.
And even today, with all the technology in the world, things still take time.
Sure. Right. So it's funny that the middle of the book is a large battle. There's a large battle happening. It spans over 2 chapters, right? But it also has, I think 6 point of view characters. And there's a lot going on. So I hop around so you can kind of see what's going on. With the idea being that I wanted it to be the rules for me and the writing when I sat down to do it. I said I want it to be cool and I want it to be clear. So I want you to go, oh, this is cool, right? And also, I know what's happening. And I didn't want to sacrifice one for the other. You know what I mean? Especially in a book where there are going to be mass battles in the book. So you can't just say, he swung his sword again. He swung his sword, the orcs ran away. Yay.
But because I don't read about ancient Rome quite as much as what I imagine most people in the US do, given that they think about it every week or more.
Well, but we got rules.
You have Julius Caesar writing his histories,
right?
And he's like, I'm in this mass battle, and I take and he's controlling it, and then he chooses the time to pick up his sword to go in to have a fight,
right?
Because he has to inspire his 10th Legion I forget which battle, but he does. Like, he's like, shit, the 10th Legion's faltering. It's my Legion. I'm grabbing a sword and going to the front.
Right.
And that like galvanizes his premier Legion to win the day. So I hope that's something that authors take in mind, is like the general doesn't have to be leading the charge necessarily like Alexander the Great. Like, you can, great. But you can also sit back and go, this is the time I need to have my influence.
Yes, right. And so the other thing is, well, I'm interested when you read it. I want to pick your brain on if you think that I did a decent job on the. On
you know what? If you're willing to come on and talk to us again after this,
totally, absolutely,
we'll gladly take you up.
Yeah, of course, that'll be great.
That means you have at least 3 guaranteed sales, right?
Yeah, we'll put charts and graphs up, like, and then the flanking maneuver.
Yeah.
Did that seem good? Like, we'll do the whole thing. It'll be good, right?
And have a whiteboard behind you.
That'll be fantastic. I'm all about it, right? All right, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate that you guys taking the time to, like, I don't know, talk to me. It's pretty awesome. Right. I also just realized that in my daughter's bedroom, with my gray shirt and my bald head, I'm not really sure where I begin and where the wall behind me is. I really should. Right.
Tony, why do you think I've got the Mandalorian behind me?
That's the way to do it. Just the way to do it. Right. It's kind of like fading into the background. Right. So
that's the one problem these guys don't understand. When you don't have hair on top of your head, you just you blend in. It doesn't matter what it is behind you. You blend into it.
That's right. Jesus. All right, buddies.
All right, Mike.
Thank you very much, man.
Thanks. Anytime, man.
Thanks, Mike.
Later, friends.